About 12 years ago, before I was racing Honda Civics, I was racing this Mk4 VW Golf that I'd swapped a 2-litre 16-valve Passat motor into. This is me almost rolling the car. However, the next weekend, my son ran into a rather large gum tree and dented the chassis, so we had to swap everything over into this yellow shell, and the car was very successful. But now, with the passage of time, things have come full circle. My son James has just bought this Golf. He's going to do a championship next year. He's right for a tar car, but the series also involves dirt events. And so he's going to run this as a dirt car. He bought it at a salvage auction last week with a bid of $150. It's a statutory write-off, which means it can't go back on the road. Hence the yellow sticker, but it's perfect for what we want to do. We're going to make a budget dirt club racer out of a very basic car. We're not going to hot the car up or modify it. What we are going to do is we're going to increase the power to weight ratio by stripping the guts out of this car and making it as light as we can. Because in this car, compared with my Mk1 Golf, weight is the enemy. From the hair clips we've found in the car, we know this was owned by a lady. And inside, it's in mint condition. Although we're going to rip all this out. Here's the reason why the car was so cheap. It's an insurance stat write-off because the P-plate woman driver that owned it hit something in here, or something ran into her. The guard is rubbing on the tyre. This door is completely jammed and won't open, and it's twisted and it's stopping this door from open. So my first job is to repair those things. It'll be a very rough repair, and I don't apologise for that. This is a no budget build. The rules will vary depending on where you live, but we could race this like that as long as there's no sharp edges. And the rules also, as I said, will allow us to strip it right out and not make any difference to the class that we're in. Somewhere underneath all that plastic is a 1.6 litre overhead cam V-dub engine. It's a 5-speed manual gearbox attached to it. So we'll clean this up, we'll take all the junk off it and just make it look a bit cleaner. I thought you'd enjoy watching this build because it is a very basic club car that we're going to make, very low budget, and you can follow us along. We'll show you the build, we'll show you a couple of the races that it's going to do. So now I've got 3 cars to work on for club racing in my garage. I've got this Honda Civic Coupe that I've got to strip a bit on and get some parts off. I've got my son's Golf that we're going to turn into a basic dirt club car. And I've got the Muscle Hatch, which needs a little bit of work on it. I think there's a rule, a law in the space-time continuum that says the more garage space you build, the quicker you fill it. There are other times where my wife says I tend to take on too much as far as cars are concerned. Some days I think she's right, and other days I know she's right. Oh well, let's get started. The first job I'm going to tackle is to see what I can do about roughly straightening out this damage from the accident that caused the car to be a write-off. So I'll see if I can do some work in here with my gentle persuader. I can fix anything on a car with a crowbar and a bloody great big hammer. If the sight of a car being violently struck makes you feel ill, or if you're going to write comments criticising me on this video, please look away. This bottom edge of the door was folded under the sill, and that was stopping it opening. So I've just gently prised that with a bar, gently for me, and now the door opens. Looks like the door is fairly much okay, and the damage, as you'd expect, is here. But that door now opens and closes. So we've come a long way in about 2 minutes already. Now for the fun part. I'm wondering now that we've got the back door open, if the front door will open. Yes. The front door was only jammed because this door was twisted up against it. So if we can get this door to sit properly in the opening, which means fixing this, we're well on the way. Hey James, remember when you were a little kid and I used to wreck cars, and when I pull the carpets out you'd come round and pick up the shrapnel? Well, in giving me this car to wreck, you forgot something. Look what I found, mate. $10.30. Now for a pensioner, this is a bloody lot of money. The car is all stripped out, bare on the inside. First job is to put a bar across the top between those pillars for the seatbelt and to strengthen it. It makes quite a spacious car now. All the plastic and trim and upholstery, it's all gone. And it's over here. Have a look at that for a pile. If there's not 120 kilos of dead weight sitting there, I mean, the back seat alone weighed about 30 kilos, with, I think, with inertia wheel seat belts built into it. If there's not 120 kilos of dead weight there, I know nothing. That's incredible. On the inside, the car is just a shell of its former self. I've trimmed off the excess brackets that the rear seats used to mount onto, and it's time to put the horizontal bar across here that we need to mount the two racing harnesses onto. But that bar also forms another important function, particularly on hatchbacks where there's very little body material here in those shelf. It's going to act as a stiffener between those two suspension towers. It'll make the car stronger, and it'll make the suspension work a little bit better because it's a solid platform. When I'm putting these bars in, I always look for the strongest points that the factory have made and try and attach to those. Normally there's a strut tower here with some bolts on it. You can make a plate that fits on, bolts onto that, and then a bar across the top. But the way VW have done this later model Golf, there are no strut towers on the inside. But what I'm going to do is, I love the way they've made this frame stiffener, factory frame stiffener. So I want to pick up those 2 points. If I put the bar across here, that will become a reinforced steel box section, a very strong frame. And back here are the mounting points for the rear seat belts. So I've made up some brackets just out of angle iron that will pick up that seat belt mounting point and the front of that frame, and the bar will go across there right over the top of that box section. It'll be mega strong. I was going to connect my seatbelt bar end bracket to the top of the wheel arch here with a conventional nut and bolt, but it would have been really fiddly getting a spanner onto a nut in there. And then I remembered something in my repertoire that's much easier, and that's a riv nut. I love these things. Check it out. Now we have a threaded post to take the nut. No spanner on the inside needed. So the bracket bolts onto the original manufacturer's rear seatbelt mounting point. And then down into the riv nut on the top of the tower. With the brackets and the bar in place, I can now mount the bar as to where the seatbelt mounting plates are going to go. But to make it easy, I'll weld them onto the tube before I weld the bar onto the brackets. When you're doing this, do yourself a favour and don't ever use galvanised pipe for this. You want really good welds for this. This bar is holding your life, so there's no room for shortcuts. Seatbelt bar is bolted in place and is finished. Got a little hole in the middle of that plate for a GoPro mount, and you can see how it's all double bolted using the rear seatbelt bolt and the top of that tower, tying that box frame completely together now. My next job is to improve the handling of this car for the dirt. With a front wheel drive car, because all the weight of the engine and transmission components are in the front, when you lighten the interior, it comes up quite a bit in the back. And what happens is you go barreling into a corner and either back off or hit the brakes, and what happens is, because the back's higher, more weight transfers to the front, and that brings on understeer. So I've found from experience with a front wheel drive, you've got to have that back right down low. Now I've had a quick look underneath this car, and I can't do the simple fix of just cutting the springs because of the shaping of the springs. They come right down to a small coil at the mounting points top and bottom. So I'll have to leave that one for James, and he'll have to buy a set of lowered springs for the back. But what I can do to make this car handle better on the dirt is to put a lot of camber on the back. This is one of my secrets of making a front wheel drive handle on the dirt, and it's one of the most neglected and yet easiest things to do. I've done this before on Golfs, and I've just had a look on the other side, and I can do the same thing on this car that I used to do on my Mk4 Golf to get a lot of camber. You won't believe how easy it is. I've removed the disc and its caliper, the hub and the backing plate, and the stub axle is bolted onto this trailing arm with 4 bolts of an unequal pattern, so you can't put it back on the wrong way around. The hole in the top is for the anti-lock brakes, which we'll get to later. To add camber, to the back, all you do is when you bolt this back on, you just put a washer or two on the bottom bolts, and that angles that out, and that's how you get your camber, just by packing the bottom of that out. Unlike the Mk4 Golf, the brake caliper mounting points are not part of the hub plate, but they're part of the trailing arm. So when I put this together, I'm also going to have to put a packing washer there, but I'll be able to do that by trial and error once I get this reassembled with a disc on it. Wheel alignment to the nth degree is not critical on a basic club level dirt car. As long as you're in the ballpark and both sides are the same, you'll be fine. So how do you measure the camber of your car? Well, you start, before you make any changes, by measuring where the factory has set it, and you can compare your measurements with what the factory settings say that it is. All you need is the car on a level floor, preferably smooth concrete, a large set square and a ruler. You put your set square up against the edge of the tyre, and you'll notice there's a small gap there at the top. You measure that gap, and that'll tell you what the factory setting is in millimetres. Now in this case, that's 10 millimetres, and I've found that's fairly common on front wheel drives, that the factory setting is 1 degree negative camber, which equals 10 millimetres there. When we measure the back, we find the gap's a bit bigger, and it's 15 millimetres. So my guess would be that the front's wanting 1 degree neg camber and the back 1.5. Why do you need camber on the back of a dirt car? Well, if you're running proper tyres like these rally tyres, they've got incredible grip sideways, and they've got very stiff sidewalls in them. So there's an incredible amount of force generated across the tyre when you're going around corners. And what happens is the tyre casing distorts and it rolls over. So by putting on more camber, what you do is you allow for the fact that the tyre is going to distort a bit, and you're trying, by putting on extra camber, to keep the tyre flatter on the road and gripping better when it's under all those G-forces going sideways. Getting this right will involve a little bit of experimentation. I've just put this thick washer on, a pair of them on the bottom, 2 mounting holes, and look at the gap here. That measures now 68, 69 millimetres, so that's nearly 7 degrees of neg camber, which is of course way too much. So what I'll do is I'll go back to a standard width washer and try a pair of those on the bottom and see if I can bring this back. But I showed you this just so you could see just how much effect those 2 little washers have put in the right place.